Hello everyone, welcome back to Just Another F1 podcast here on the Apex Motorsport. My name is Richard Smyth, and joining me for this one is accredited Formula 1 photographer and our very own British GT photographer and GP3 Championship photographer, Craig Evans. Craig, thank you for joining me for this one. We just had one of the most bizarre weekends, I think, in Formula 1 history, at least in my memory. The Belgian Grand Prix, if we can even call it a full Grand Prix race. We had only a couple laps behind the safety car, half point. Craig, I'm going to throw in the spot straight away. Sum up that race in three words.
Oh, 3 words. Extremely, very wet. I think are the best three to sum that one up. I mean, who'd have thought? I mean, I've never seen, and I don't think I can recall a race ever being that wet. They kept mentioning Fuji, 2007, and the last one that came to memory that didn't run the distance, I believe, was Malaysia, 2013 or 2012. But my goodness, it was a very interesting afternoon indeed.
It was. There was so much to talk about, very little action on track, which is crazy to think about. But I think we're going to start off the way we usually do, with a little bit of F1 higher or lower. And, well, I think I'll start with my question first. I know I usually ask you, but it's to pick up your knowledge there that the last time Formula 1 was awarded half points was in 2009 in the Malaysian Grand Prix. That was won.
2009.
That race was won by the eventual world champion Jenson Button. So, here is my question for you. That race lasted 55 minutes before the red flag was eventually flown. But did the 1975 Australian Grand Prix run for a higher or lower number of minutes than 55?
55. Now, I should know this because I was researching this for your question, and I've completely forgotten how many minutes it ran. Because I know they went out and started, and it was just utter carnage. I'm gonna say more than. This is stab in the dark. I should know this because I literally read the stat this morning. Not this morning, before we sat down to do this. I'm gonna say lower amount of time.
So it was less than 55 minutes of racing. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Well, that is incorrect, because there's actually 58 minutes of racing.
Oh, come on. 3 minutes.
Yes.
Oh, dearie me.
And that is the exact length of today's race. So,
yeah,
you had a full Grand Prix distance difference there.
Yeah, it was 2009. I got my years muddled out.
They only mentioned
I knew it was Malaysia. I couldn't remember the year.
They only mentioned it about 5 times in the broadcast.
The short, stubby cars.
Those years.
So I guess I'll hop in with my
question.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So obviously, when it came to racing, we only had an hour on the clock. By the time the cars left the pit lane, we had an hour left. We'll cover race time, race starts, and all the whole mind-bending numbers and all of that were discussed today later on. My question to you: the last time we had an hour-long race was, of course, the sprint race at Silverstone. That was the time limit for that race. I want to know: is 3 laps of the home of Formula 1, so the home of, at Silverstone, higher or lower than the race distance of today's race?
Oh, well, I'll pick you up on the point that the sprint race was actually only 25 minutes and not an hour, as you said. So, can I get a point for that?
No, that wasn't the question, I'm afraid.
So how long was the race distance?
No, the limit for the sprint race was an hour, wasn't it?
I thought it was only half an hour.
Because it was 17 laps.
I don't think it was an hour, though.
Oh, well, there we go. Hang on. Well, you can think of that.
Yeah, you can double check that.
I'll get Google. I'll give it a Google.
So, how long do you say it was 15-something kilometres for the Belgian Grand Prix? 3 laps, or the total race length?
So, the total race length today, it was 14.008 kilometres.
Okay, so 3 laps of Silverstone then?
Yes.
Oh, It's a very good question. This is the typical time killing part. Uh, Silverstone, it's in and around 5k, I think. So I'm gonna go higher.
You're going to go higher?
Yeah.
Are you going to have a guess at how much higher?
It's probably like 1.5 kilometers or something around that.
It is 3.7 kilometers further.
Okay.
3 laps of Silverstone. Oh, there we go then. No, you are right. It's designed to last around 25 to 30 minutes.
So 2
So I
points for me.
stand corrected on that one. I could have sworn it was an hour.
Yeah.
There we go.
Maybe that's something they can consider for Monza.
Indeed, yeah, a bit of a longer one. But then Monza's usually over in like an hour and 10 minutes anyway.
That's true, but to make up for the lack of racing today.
Yeah, just add a couple of laps on throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah. just randomly, just don't let the teams know which race is going to happen, and it will throw everyone of all sorts, race strategies, fuel strategies, just out the window. Just an announcement,
Yeah.
5 minutes before the end of a race, we're doing 2 extra laps today.
Yeah, indeed. That'd throw the cat among the pigeons, wouldn't it?
I definitely would. So I don't really know where we can start with this, but I think probably the best place to start is qualifying, because for once Saturday really had a big impact on the final race result. And I think we'll start with probably the biggest incident during qualifying, which would happen in Q3, which when Lando Norris went going up a Rouge into Radion, had a very high speed crash. Luckily he got out of the car okay. He hurt his elbow, but he was cleared to take part in the race. Craig, when you were watching that, especially when Sebastian Vettel come over the team radio just before it saying that we need to throw a red flag, this isn't safe to be out here, did you think this crash was inevitable? It was always going to happen?
I think overall it's been a tough weekend for the FIA, because we've got to think. You look back at, we've had 3 pretty big accidents over on Eau Rouge and Radion and the corners that follow. So I think the FIA were always stuck in a bit of a hard place with what to do. But for the qualifying yesterday, they made the wrong call. It should have been red flagged, and that was quite evident with Vettel, with what he said over the radio. And it was quite evident in the way Norris's outlap went that he was struggling so much for grip. And I think the decision to run yesterday and what could have happened in that Norris accident played a big factor in what we saw happen today with the race and the way that was run. But that was a nasty one for Norris, and we're lucky there were no other cars on the track, because if there had have been, that could have been a very, very bad accident. But it wasn't, so that's the important thing.
Yeah, and on the last podcast, right at the end, we were discussing that corner over Rouge about. It was after Jack Aiken's incident, the GT World Challenge as well. So
yeah, we did cover it.
Yeah, it was a tough weekend, as you said. There was multiple crashes, W Series, Formula 3, all at the same place, with the cars being thrown back out onto the track, bouncing off that wall. We've seen in the past, obviously, with the Hubert incident and a few other crashes. It's a dangerous corner. Now, there is plans in place to change it. I haven't really looked at them in too much detail. I know they're mainly to allow motorbike racing at the circuit, so it'll be interesting to see going ahead. But Craig, do you think now, especially after this weekend, that there'll be a few changes going forward to make the corner a bit more safe?
Well, the plans were actually in place for this year, to get it changed for this year and this season, to obviously, I think, move the barrier on the left-hand side of Eau Rouge further back to give it more runoff, which would solve a fair few of the problems. But obviously, something's been going on over the past year globally, so I don't know what that could have been, which has kind of put way to that. And there was, of course, the bad flooding they had not that long ago. But yeah, it was. I reckon we've had a lucky weekend, looking at the accidents we've seen there, because the W Series 1 was big, and that was a combination of slick tires, not slick tires, sorry, standing water, everyone coming out close together. Yeah, that the W Series one for me made me wince when I saw it because it was so similar to the Hubert and Correa crash. But obviously, they weren't travelling as fast. But the argument is that's the circuit, that's the way it should be. But you can't have that argument when you're driving down that track towards that corner at nearly 200 miles an hour. Yes, we can keep the fundamentals of the circuit the same, but we can't have cars being hit in the barrier and being flung into the firing line of other cars because we don't want to see that as fans and as lovers of the sport. We don't want to see these massive accidents where people can get seriously injured. So I think the changes are welcome, and I think they should definitely be in for next year, I believe, is the plan now, after everything that's gone on over the past 18 months.
Yeah, I have to agree with what you say there. The actual track itself, the actual circuit where you're meant to be racing within track limits, that doesn't need to change. It's what around it that has to be changed in order to keep that. So we'll have to wait and see what these plans are when they're actually implemented, and we'll just hope that we'll not see these scary incidents again going into the future. To stick with qualifying, after we just discussed the Norris crash, there was a hero that many people call Mr. Saturday. Anyway, George Russell was on provision of pole before Max Verstappen decided to spoil the party and claim pole position, which ultimately meant he got the race won in the end up. But for George Russell, what a lap that was. We know now that he's gone on to claim second place, his first podium of his Formula 1 career, but he earned that on the Saturday through that qualifying lap. Craig, when you seen that, just what was the emotions like for you to see George Russell putting in one of the best laps I've ever seen?
The mad thing was, we were sat watching qualifying, and because Russell and Latifi had been running extremely well on the inters in Q1, hadn't they?
Yep.
They were up there in Q1. And I can remember looking and seeing Russell's not set a time. And I can remember saying to my dad, I was like, you watch Russell. You watch his time. Purple sector, first sector. Purple second sector. Purple third sector. When I saw that, I was jumping off the sofa. It was brilliant. Brilliant to see. And it was just the way he drove that car. I mean, he out-qualified both Mercs. Well, he out-qualified everyone bar Verstappen, and he only just missed out on pole. I think the gap to pole was something like 3 or 4 tenths. And let's be real, in a Williams, that's arguably one of the best Saturday laps we've seen in a long time. The last time I can remember fully standing up and just you've got no other reaction than a round of applause was Hamilton in the Styrian Grand Prix last season, where he was 1.6 or 1.7 seconds clear of the rest of the field. You don't often see those laps on a Saturday, but my goodness, when you do, they are a real treat.
I mean, George Russell can say that he has out-qualified every driver on the grid, bar Max Verstappen.
Well, I think it was what I saw on Twitter, and it was one of these. It was a funny a picture. It was someone off Would I Lie to You holding up their Would I Lie to You card, and it said the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix qualifying, George Russell is the fastest powered Mercedes car. And it was just, you think of it like that and you think, so he's out-qualified both Mercs, both Aston Martins, and his teammate, and he's second. I still can't believe it, to be fair. It was an absolutely incredible lap.
I know we're not going to discuss this podcast because we have every time, but the whole, Russell's a Mercedes. But I think the question now is, does Hamilton want to go to Williams because they were the quicker car over the weekend?
Can you imagine? Hamilton to Williams next year.
Well, Valtteri Bottas to Williams, that might be the best move of his career. I think that's what
part of the deal is.
Yeah, most likely.
The interesting thing to me was Russell's interview after the race, where I think Natalie Pinkham asked him, do you know where you're going to be next year, and is it just a matter of other pieces falling into place? And his answer was yes. So I think I don't know if we can give him that Merc seat already, but I think, I mean, he deserves it, surely.
Yeah.
The especially this weekend, is a prime example. And I mentioned it in a tweet earlier. I think we can stop calling Russell the future star, because he is arguably one of the most skilled drivers out there. I would put him in the same category as Hamilton, Verstappen, Alonso, Vettel. Those drivers, and to an extent Norris, those drivers that come into the sport and you straight away, well, not straight away, you start to see over the years, they're the real deal.
I think it also puts to bed that debate. Was it, what year did Russell, Albon and Norris come in? That was 2018.
3 years ago,
Yeah, 2018. When people were saying that none of these drivers are ready, that's now all three of them on the podium at some stage in their career in Formula 1.
It is indeed.
Just shows you what Formula 2 can do. Well, hasn't been
that
too
2017 great. Formula 2 season, though, is arguably one of the best seasons of Formula 2 I've ever watched.
Yeah, I think that was probably the second sort of season of Formula 2 I really got into, and it was just phenomenal.
It was fantastic.
Just to see them, it was fantastic. So, yeah, all three of them on the podium at some point. Russell, obviously, and Norris still in the sport, Albon not. He was there. I was waiting for Red Bull to try to find some loophole for him to drive. There was actually reports that he was potentially getting the seat for this weekend, when there was a lot of rumours going around that one of the Red Bull or AlphaTauri drivers had tested positive for COVID, but obviously that didn't materialise, that all the drivers were here. So, just, we'll not speak about Albon too much, but when we're talking about him, what do you see as future career going? Do you think this IndyCar seat can materialise?
Maybe. I think there's talk of a Formula 1 seat, and there's talk of a IndyCar seat. So I think that's going to be a matter of, we'll have to wait and see what happens. To me, with the Red Bull driver program, it all depends on what happens with Tsunoda.
Yeah.
Because I think Max and Perez are now confirmed for next year.
They are.
Those second seats at AlphaTauri, I think Gasly's pretty much confirmed.
I think Gasly is, but Tsunoda has.
Tsunoda is option, the one. Yeah, the Tsunoda's the one will revolve around.
Yeah.
So I suppose we'll have to wait and see what the coming weeks hold for that seat.
I think it's about time we actually discuss the race. This podcast so far is probably double, if not 3 times the length of it. Actually, it's a lot longer. Just realised we're going for about 15 minutes. So like 5 times the length of the race. That's absolutely crazy. I think we need to probably start with, well, obviously the start was delayed for about 25 minutes. They went out for, it was a two laps they did, and then the red flag was flown. The drivers come back into the pits, and then we had a lovely 3-hour wait where chaos, I think is the only way of putting it, where no one knew what was going on. There was, every team in the grid had a different, well, they see the sporting regulations in a different way. The FIA sort of, were agreeing with some teams, not agreeing with others, making up things as they went. It appeared. Could I just sum up that 3 hours and the absolute chaos and minefield that is Formula 1, basically?
Well, I think the way to start is with Perez's incident on his lap to the grid, because jokingly, you text me just after it happened saying that Christian Horner would text Michael Massey saying, "Oh, Michael, can you delay the start of the race until we have time to repair Perez's car and we can get him back in?" I, at the time, thought that was a joke. And I did as well.
Yes.
And it, lo and behold, came to fruition that is what had happened. And then that pursued that. I've kind of jumped off the whole race start argument.
Yeah, we'll speak about Perez first. It's probably had kicked off everything, really.
And I think the fact that Michael Massey, who is the race director, was obviously on the phone to, it was Jonathan Wheatley, wasn't it?
Yes.
The technical director at Red Bull. He was on, well, I say phone, it's radio.
Yeah.
He was on the radio to him saying, well, look, he can start because the race hasn't actually started yet. And then Michael, I'll have to check that. And I think the confusion came, and this links into the start of the race, the FIA did not make clear when the official race started. That's where most of today's confusion has come from. And it turns out the race did eventually start when the cars left the pit lane the second time, after the second red flag, to do the two, well, let's be honest, procession laps. It wasn't a race. We can't call it a race. I mean, how amazing is it, though, that Red Bull mechanics got that car fixed? 4-hour job done in just over an hour.
Yeah, it was. If we look at it that way, the job they done was fantastic. But it's a point that you texted me during the race as well. That point you've raised beforehand. Red Bull fixing the car on the red flags. Should it be allowed? Should we go back to that debate or not?
I mean, we can do. We can touch on it briefly. I mean, when we consider Red Bull were the voice of saying you should not be allowed to change the car or repair the car under red flags after the whole Verstappen and Hamilton Silverstone coming together, you know, you might have heard about it. I don't know. It's a pretty small story in F1. All of a sudden, that's 2 races in a row now where Red Bull have benefited massively. Well, not massively in this case, but they definitely did in Hungary, of repairing a car under red flag conditions. So I think that kind of lays that argument to rest. And I think we came to the agreement on the podcast, didn't we, that it should be allowed because we want to see everyone racing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the key thing. And the thing that got me was it's the fact that it was when they called Michael Massey and said, oh, he can start. And he went, no, because he had external assistance. And Wheatley said straight away, but the race hasn't started yet. It's the lap to the grid. So technically, we've not broken any regulations. That's the word. Regulations. Had there been a race and had Perez gone on to score points, then I reckon we'll be looking at a different situation because obviously he didn't have the start procedure sorted. The tyres weren't on the car at the set time. The tyres weren't warmed to the proper temperatures, and they didn't go through the correct starting procedure. That would have been a whole different ball game. And the fact he only did 2, I mean, no one really lost anything, if really, from him starting at the back, did they? I think the whole Perez thing is, well, it's never happened before, has it?
I don't think so. Obviously, Verstappen was at Hungary last year, or was even this season, that they had to fix the car within minutes.
Last year.
Yeah, like that, we've seen that, but this was bizarre. You know, I've never seen a car, because it sort of opens up the question of what officially is a retirement. Is it when the driver gets out of the car? But then again, the rest of the drivers did get out of the car under red flag conditions.
And this is what I mean when it comes into, I think the problem from today came from the wording of what the actual start of the race was.
Yeah.
Because we were discussing it throughout the race, that we were trying to work out when the actual race started. And I think the other thing is, no one knew when that 3-hour window started.
No.
Because I swear they said over the radio it hadn't started, and then literally half an hour later, yes, that started at 3 o'clock at the scheduled start time.
Yeah,
that was the weird thing.
There's a point, I think this is from the actual sporting regulations, and I'm not going to get into them too much because there's too many words in it for us to read. But if the race director decides that a start should be delayed, the following procedures apply. If the race has not been started, the abort lights will be switched on, a board saying delayed start will be displayed, engines should be stopped, and all competitors will be informed of the likely delay with the official messaging system, which wasn't updated for about 2 hours during this race. And then they begin 5-minute warning, tire changing on the grid is not permitted, and every time this happens, the race will be shortened by 1 lap. That's another point that I didn't even really know that existed, that every time there was an extra lap behind the safety car, there was a lap deducted, obviously for fuel, but are those racing laps?
Martin Brundle made the point of that's a different delayed start, because I think that in terms of that regulation you just read out, I think that is in relation to an aborted race start.
Yeah.
So say we do the formation lap, someone breaks down on the grid, and we have to do another one. That I think is that one, and I think the fact that the start procedure hadn't even been started, that's where the problem arises, because we hadn't actually started a session. The reason we were had one lap taken off was because they did 2 formation laps, but we never actually started the race.
Because we didn't get a message up saying extra formation lap, which we usually would if it was an aborted start.
Exactly.
But I think it was made over on Sky F1 that F1 used the same, or FIA rather, they use the same terminology, the delayed start. It branches over across the different things and it applies to so many different circumstances, because you're not going to get, it's very unlikely to get a delayed start and then a aborted race start. It's unlikely that's ever going to happen at the same time, so they just use delayed start. But I think it shows sort of the way these teams work, that they're always trying to gain an advantage, and they know these rules inside out. That they're always looking for the small technicalities in it to try to and give them as an advantage, but it confuses everyone. But I think the best thing that Formula 1 have done all season is bring in that communication to the live TV feed between the teams and Michael Massey, because if we didn't hear that today, we would have been sitting for 3 hours without a clue about what was going on.
Clueless. Yeah. No, I agree, and I think, and again, another point I raised during the race, I think we're going to see a lot of regulation come in for next year around what would happen if a race is rained off.
Yeah.
Because we've never seen this before. It's to use the word of the past 18 months, it's unprecedented to see a race rained off. And I think that's where we're going to see all this new regulation come in, because I texted you and I said, I genuinely don't think anyone knows what's going on here.
No.
I genuinely think today was a bit of a mad dash and a mad panic just to make sure that it didn't seem very well. It was very well organised come the end, but I think towards the first hour of sitting there doing nothing in the pit lane, it definitely felt like a lot of different information was going to different people.
Yeah.
Which I think caused the problems.
Well, you had Red Bull obviously arguing to try and get Perez back in, and then you've got Mercedes. They were told that the race would start 3 p.m. local time, 2 p.m. UK time, but the race, they were told that the race started. Therefore, Perez, they were arguing that Perez shouldn't be allowed to rejoin, because what they were told was the race had already started. The time, this 3-hour window that everyone was talking about. But then McLaren then raised the point that, does the delayed start mean that the laps were taken off, which meant that we only had 39 laps, and then Alpine were going that the race never actually started. So you had, in the space of them 3 hours, you had at least 4 different teams giving 4 different versions of what was happening, and it was just confusing. I think it got to the point where everyone just was sitting waiting just for an announcement to say race event cancelled, or the race is not starting, or race start at whatever time, because everyone was looking at different things and no one had a clue at all what was going on.
I think again it was the clarification that the FIA gave, because as soon as they said the timer has started, they then said Perez could start from the pit lane. And I said to you, I was like, I'm sure if the timer's started and he's missed the first lap, surely he's a lap down if the timer's started. Yeah. He's missed the start of the race, so he should not be able to start.
We would have a lap extra fuel.
Exactly, yeah.
2 laps, rather.
Burnt up the fuel doing that 1 lap. And then, yeah, it all got very confusing quite very fast, actually.
I think it was whenever it was announced that it would be only 39 laps of the race, if it was a lap race. It would mean that Perez would have to be 5 laps down, but the official classification at the end of the race says he wasn't even lapped out. He finished 38 seconds behind his teammate who won the race.
That's the bit, I think, had he gone on to score points,
yeah,
that's where there would have been protests.
Yeah, I agree with that because Perez was sort of the biggest loser of this because he was the only driver to drop out of the points, really. Um,
Yeah, and he gave Williams another double points finish.
Yep, which credit to them, that's fantastic. That's 2 races in a row that they've both finished in the points.
Yeah, they're on a mad run of form, Williams, at the minute.
It's great to see. For Williams, that's them up to 8th in the standings now. It's probably the highest they're going to finish because they've got 33 points to Aston Martin ahead of them, which I don't think will be achievable. Although if Russell puts in a few more performances like he has, you never know.
Yeah, you do never know. I mean, it can go either way. But that's the good thing for Williams. That's cemented them 8th, I think.
Yes, it has, because there's 17 points between them and Alfa Romeo and 20 between them and Haas. Which, for Williams, given that, I think many people thought Haas were coming in here as the slowest team, with Williams just slightly ahead of them. I think for me, Williams have been one off, if not the team of the season so far.
They have been absolutely fantastic this season, and it's so nice to see as well the team finally getting some good results. And when we say they got their first points as the Russell Latifi pairing 3-4 weeks ago. They've got their first podium this week. Yeah, yeah, it's in freak conditions, but that's a mad jump up the field.
Yeah, it's brilliant to see. I'm trying to go through what else really could say. The drivers were trying to provide us with some level of entertainment. Pierre Gasly was asking for the team to put on a bit of a barbecue, a few sausages in the barbecue, and there's quite a bit of banter online between the teams on social media saying who's invited, who's not invited. And then you had someone in the grandstands eating chips and mayo with a topping of rain water on top of it.
Yeah, that's always a good topping to have on your fries. Now the question is, with the Pierre Gasly sausage sandwich, barbecue or ketchup?
Oh, see, well, I'm trying to think what Pierre Gasly would have. I think Sky F1 decided it would probably be French mustard.
Oh, no.
No, it's not for me. I'm barbecue any day of the week, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
What would you choose?
I don't know. Can I be like super awkward and cut the sandwich in half and have half ketchup, half barbecue?
Yo, I'll go for it because I think I would join you in that one.
There we go then. So we'll do a ketchup, we'll do one barbecue, and then we'll just swap half the sandwich.
Yeah.
As ever, diplomatic.
Yes. Yuki Tsunoda as well. He also informed us what he had for his early dinner or late lunch or whatever time of day they're eating at. He had an espresso, a sandwich, and soup. Now I think the big question of this is what type of sandwich and what type of soup did he have?
Well, surely if you're having a sandwich and soup, it's got to be a cheese sandwich with tomato soup.
But
that's what I'd have.
Okay. You see, I would just like a plain bread roll with a chicken noodle cup of soup.
Interesting.
But the espresso is a weird addition to it. Personally, I don't mind espresso, but it's 2 liquids and the sandwich there is a bit too much.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. Oh, now we've completely gone off track again.
No, I actually have these down in the notes that we need to discuss these. Because
nothing else happened, did it?
Yeah, there was 3 laps of racing. There's 3 minutes of racing, so we have to try to fill time some way. I must say, fair play though to Crofty and Martin Brundle and the rest of the Sky team.
Top job.
4 hours of time filling.
Yeah.
For that with 1 ad break.
That was spectacular. And that's what I've always said. That's the kind of stuff where people really,
earn the money.
They show their talent, and I think those two absolutely nailed it.
Yep, they definitely did. And yesterday, whenever there was a red flag during qualifying, I was listening to the BBC 5 Live team, Jack Nicholls, Julian Palmer. They were brilliant as well. Time film, although, and I did tweet this yesterday, and both of the presenters did like it, that they've got nothing on the BBC Radio Ulster Sports sound team of Liam Beckett and Joel Taggart, the Northwest 200, when they have to time fill for about 8 hours every year. You'll not have witnessed this. You'll have to come over to witness it some year. It is spectacular because they talk about everything from the racing to tomato sandwiches. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, there
It's
we go then.
it's fantastic. And I think, well, the final bit of off track action I seen was the Haas versus Aston Martin garage football match that was going on.
Yeah, that looked quite good. That did.
I think the last update it was 8-6 to well, they're calling it Germany for England, so Germany 8, England 6. What do you make of that
Hang
result?
on, who was? Oh, so
It
how was it
was
Germany?
it
England.
was Vettel Schumacher against two English Haas mechanics.
Ah, there we go. There we go.
So what do you make of that result? And using your sports journalism knowledge, what do you make of both teams' performance?
Yeah, it was a solid performance from both teams. Obviously, well, I mean it's football, so of course the Germans were going to win. Yeah, and that's about the extent of my football knowledge. Gone down the drain. But and the other thing that did make me laugh was Daniel Ricciardo sneaking up and
Yeah.
RKOing his race engineer
Yeah,
in the garage.
and also start the Mexican wave. I did like that as well.
Yes, that was good.
That was quality. Is there anything else we need to talk about the race?
I think the
well,
one
the
thing I'd like
points.
to ask you.
Okay, go
yeah,
ahead.
exactly. That's what I was just about to
Mhm.
get onto. Obviously, we only had 2 laps behind the safety car
Yeah.
to award half points. Now, if I Google
No, I have the
race
quote.
race definition,
Okay, go ahead. Because
we have. Go on.
while you're doing that, I'll explain what really happened here because I have the quotes from Michael Massey who confirmed the reasons why points were awarded. It says there's been 3 laps completed. The 3rd lap was completed as the cars crossed the control line in the fast lane, also known as the pit lane. And then there's the classification for the points is taken on the penultimate lap of the race. The penultimate lap before the lap. Autosport have got this a bit wrong here. They can't read it correctly. Taken on the penultimate lap before the lap the signal was given. That's rewording it. So there's effectively 2 separate points. One is what's done to complete a race, and one is what's done on the basis of championship points.
Yes.
So you have
the race technically finished in the pit lane, but because it was a red flag for championship points, the race finished when we crossed the line on lap 2.
So give me your definitions there.
So the definition of a race is a competition between runners, horses, or vehicles to see which one is fastest in covering a set course. By definition, we did not have a race today. We had a procession. And the question is, should half race points be considered after 2 laps, or should they be considered after 50% of race distance?
Personally, I think it needs to be 50%, but I also think there needs to be some level of discretion that, say a race was 47% complete, and, well, then you can't really make rules for one event and not for the other, but...
Exactly, but this is the problem we have. It's them claiming that today was a race and a race was completed. It wasn't a race, it was... And the interesting thing I found is Hamilton has taken this on, and he's put on his Instagram, and this is quote directly from his Instagram: "Today was a farce, and the only people to lose out are the fans who have paid good money to watch us race. Of course, you can't do anything about the weather, but we have sophisticated equipment to tell us what's going on, and it was clear that the weather wasn't going to let up. We were sent out for one reason and one reason only: 2 laps behind the safety car where there is no position gain or loss of placement, or to provide entertainment to the fans is not racing. We shouldn't have just called it. We should have just called it quits, not risk the drivers, and importantly, refunded the fans, who are the heart of our sport." The thing that I found interesting is now, by the legal definition in the FIA documentation, a race had been completed. We had completed 2 laps, which means a race had been completed. I'm no lawyer on this, and I'm not. I haven't read the full documentation, but that now means a race has been finished. So sponsors, track hire, payments to fans that were there all day. That now means that they can say, "Well, we didn't have a race." Well, yes, we did. We had, by definition, we had a race. That's the bit I'm not that comfortable with.
Which can be considered more a race, sprint qualifying or today's Belgian Grand Prix?
To me, sprint qualifying, because we actually had a race.
Yeah. So if Formula One do not want to call sprint qualifying a race, they can't call this a race.
Exactly, and I think this is the problem that they've landed themselves in, because you can't call it a race when it's 2 laps behind the safety car.
No.
And the fact that they did the podium as well, yes, it was Russell's first podium. The fact they did the podium would rub salt in the wound, really, didn't it?
Yeah, they're just following the procedures of, we finished the race, this is what's happening. But
yeah,
it should be a rule, if they're sticking with this two lap rule, that 2 complete green laps. Like, DRS doesn't open for 3 complete green laps on dry conditions. So why does this consider the race?
Yeah, I think that's the part that's going to go on for a while now.
Yeah.
And it will be interesting to see what the race organisers in Belgium do in regards to refunds, because if it would have been, I mean, I was at Spa 2 years ago in 2019, and we got lucky with the weather then, and we had a great race. But had that been me today, as a fan, not as a photographer, as a fan, yeah, I'd be a bit miffed off, really. But then the other argument, this is why I said at the start the FIA was stuck between a rock and a hard place. The other argument is, I agree with what the FIA did in terms of not racing, because I would much rather not have a race or have a 2-lap procession race than see someone get seriously injured or worse. But the problem is, there's a lot of money involved in going racing, and that's kind of why I thought we got the 2 laps today, and obviously that's what Hamilton was aiming at in what he said.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I think it's the financial aspect of the sport played a bigger role than the safety and the logistical side of the sport. It was we can't say, because we don't know the entire facts, that it's fully financial. And they could have sent, because the time that the cars did go out was when this gap they were talking about in the Weller, they had that chance, and it just so happened that when they went out, it started, the rain was coming back, it was getting even heavier. If that rain didn't come, and I think what the biggest problem they had was they had to give the teams a 10-minute warning.
Yeah.
If they didn't have that 10-minute warning, they could have went out 10 minutes before that and got 6-7 laps in before calling the red flag because it was too dangerous.
Yeah, and this is the benefit of hindsight now.
Yeah.
Because it turns out when we first did those formation laps, they were the best of the conditions.
Yeah.
And I think that's hindsight in all of that. But surely if we're going out to run 2 laps behind the safety car, that can't be a race. It can't be a race result. And is it worth points? That's the other big question.
I think if you're basing on everything, the classification was there. They met all the requirements for that. So have your race classification, award your drivers. I wouldn't even award the podium positions, as much as George Russell getting his first podium. They didn't do any. They didn't have a green lap of racing, so they were there. They couldn't move in that position. Exactly. The only way they could have, if they crashed out.
Can you have a classification and not score points? That's the other interesting question, I think, that we should talk about. Can you have a race classify as a race, but award no championship points?
That's a very good point.
Because in theory, as I've said, there was no race today. Well, there was by the definition, but in the FIA documents. But this is the problem. I think the fact, again, it's never happened before.
It's whether or not they at any point considered making it a non-championship race. I think that's the only way you can get a classification without points.
Exactly, yeah.
Which I don't think they would have done, because they've been too. They can't make a Grand Prix race a non-championship race with all the contracts that they've signed, because sponsors have signed up to sponsor the Belgian Grand Prix, not the Belgian round of of no championship, basically.
Exactly. Pedro Dosa has tweeted earlier today. Quite sad to see points being given for a race that never happened. A race behind the safety car is not a race. Should never have been considered a race. That is an argument I'm seeing a lot of drivers agree with, and go through and share very similar sentiments. The other problem that they had, of course, is Zandvoort next weekend. So we couldn't run on Monday because the calendar was too congested up and too close together. It couldn't run today. What other solution could we have had? Just a null and void race?
It's probably the only other option they could have had.
But then you get into the money side where it's like, well, we didn't get a race, so you need to pay back the fans. We need to pay out the licensing and all of that stuff. And this is the rock and hard place they were caught between. And I think ultimately they made the right call in not running. But it shouldn't have been. In my opinion, it should not have classified as a race because we didn't have a race.
The option by racing on a Monday is something that we have seen in other series. IndyCar and NASCAR do it quite frequently if they can't race. I think it shows that Formula 1 and the FA have no contingency plan for this, because this is a scenario that, although it's never been seen before, it's one that in conversations with loads of people, someone would have mentioned it somewhere, because we've seen it in other series.
And the last time F1 raced on a Monday was Spain, 1974. So it has happened in the past where we've seen a race on a Monday. But it was Michael Massey said, there is no contingency to race on a Monday. So is it not a thing anymore to race on a Monday?
It's probably, I think the big worry they had was they wouldn't get marshals in.
Yeah, exactly.
When do I think, and this is going to throw up a whole pile of, open a can of worms basically for future videos and stuff, but when does Formula 1 prioritize sport integrity over their financial side?
Yeah, and I think that's what Hamilton was aiming at today when he made his comments. It's fans, and coming from a fan that's been an F1 fan most of my life, it's not a thing of, let's go to every race. It's let's save up for 2 to 3 years, maybe even longer sometimes, and let's go to a race. I mean, for Spa, we were saving for what? A good few years, 4 or 5 years, to decide, right, we'll put it in a little pocket and we'll put it in a little jar, a metaphorical jar, and go for a race. And then we decided to go to Spa. But you've got to feel for the fans that have commuted there. And Belgium's traffic is terrible to get into the circuit. So you have to feel for those fans that haven't had a race. Yeah.
I think we've done quite well to get about 45 minutes out of a 3-minute race. We have done quite well.
Not too bad.
Any final thoughts to say about the race before we move on to the predictions for the next race?
Not particularly. I think we've covered every second of action that we had. I tell you what, I'm interested to see how the next few weeks unfold with the backlash of what's happened today, because this isn't going to go to bed and settle down. There will be a lot of regulation change. There'll be a lot of talk among the teams on what the procedures should now be and how they're going to be changed to fit around if this does happen again.
It's a good thing for F1 to learn. They might not have been racing, but there's a lot learned, I think, for everyone from this race.
Oh, 100%.
I think, the final point I want to make is the fastest lap point. I don't think it's been officially given to anyone. Max Verstappen is now technically getting it, because if we go back to this lap 1 classification, but
Mazepin officially got it.
If cross the line, but if they're using the lap 1 classification, Max Verstappen set the fastest lap.
You see, now that's a whole different kettle of fish.
So are we chatting a half a point extra, which would take Verstappen to
No,
two?
this is the interesting thing. It's not half a point, and I don't think Max will get it.
It's not in the classification. If he did get it, it would take him over the 200 point mark and close the championship battle to like 2 points.
Yeah, it would. But can you imagine come the end of the season, though, if Hamilton wins the championship by
Half a point.
12 points?
If the championship battle goes down to that, Red Bull will appeal this race and there'll be. Although, do they not say it's whenever the awards are handed out, it's when the season's technically considered over, so they have to then. I don't think this is the last we ever hear about this race.
Oh no, because as you say, if this championship comes down to 12 points, there's going to be some annoyed people somewhere, whether that be in Mercedes or Red Bull camps.
Yeah. Well, now probably the biggest question of the whole podcast: are we counting these predictions and the actual championship for the ones we have for this race? If we're not considering the race.
You see, now this is where are we going to have moral integrity when it comes to giving each other points?
I'll make it easier for you. There's only 1 point scored between us.
Oh, between all of us?
Yes, and none of them were about the race.
Who scored the point?
Actually, you got 2 points. It was you that got 2 points. So,
what did I predict? It was so long ago, I can't remember.
Yeah. Pole for Max Verstappen.
Yep.
And Russell Q3.
Hey.
So I'll give you them, given that it wasn't anything about the race, which means you have.
You can always lodge an appeal. Yeah, no, technically they had nothing to do with the race, so
yes.
we'll have those, please.
Well, chat about half points. I'm actually on 12.5 points. You're on 17, and you and Ryan are 17, I should say. So you have a bit of a lead, but.
So there will be an appeal coming from Richard if we win by 2 or more points come the end of the season. Yes.
So prediction time for the Dutch Grand Prix, Verstappen's second home race of the season. So we'll start off with pole position.
Pole position. I'm gonna say Max again.
Okay, I'm going for Hamilton purely because I think he'll be really up for it, and especially Zandvoort to want to beat Verstappen.
No, I'm gonna say Hamilton for a win.
Okay, I'm gonna go left field, new circuit, Charles Leclerc for the win.
It could be. I mean, anyone. We don't know.
Yeah. Podium. Who are you gonna put alongside Lewis Hamilton?
I'm gonna go for. So Hamilton winning, Max second. But no, I want to say but no, I'm going to be out there. Norris third.
Okay, I'm going for Hamilton Perez.
Interesting.
Fastest lap.
Perez.
I'm going to go for George Russell.
No, I'm going to say Hamilton fastest lap.
Okay. So Hamilton, Russell, potential Mercedes pair next season, potentially. And our wildcard prediction.
I mean, can it get more wild than what we saw today?
Yeah, like last time I said Yuki Tsunoda points, you said Russell Q3. From now on, I'm not allowing Russell and Q3 as a wildcard prediction because it's happened too frequently.
Yeah. Okay. Wildcard prediction. I mean, can I say Ricciardo top 8?
Okay, that's one that can also be appealed at the end of the season. I'm gonna go for 12 cars to finish the race.
12.
Yes.
That's up. I mean, it is Zandvoort, so you never know.
It'll be over a month since he last raced, so.
Yeah, it will be.
The racing action. Be interesting. Zandvoort, new circuit, first or the second race of this triple header, start of the rest of the season with Qatar potentially during the calendar. What's your thoughts on the Qatar circuit?
I mean, I've not actually seen it, to be honest. From the Qatar circuit, I mean, the bikes race there quite frequently. It's usually a good
is a decent circuit for World Superbikes. They've raced there a few times.
So we'll have to see what no, this is interesting. Sorry, I've completely gone off topic. F1 CEO Dominicali resist call for refunds as Hamilton Brand's British GP a farce.
Oh.
Now, if we look at it, the headline is F1 CEO resisted calls for spectators at Spa to be given refunds after today's drastically shortened rain-hit race.
Ooh.
Drastically shortened?
Non-existent almost.
Exactly. You can't call it shortened. There wasn't a race at all. There we go. As what I said, it's going to go on for a while.
Yep, and that definitely will. So yeah, that is going to bring to an end this podcast. One of our longer podcasts and one of the shorter races, which is quite bizarre. But anyway, Craig, thank you for joining me for this one. If you haven't seen, because it's been a while since our last podcast, me and Craig were at Snetterton for the British GT round, and we done a new thing called Paddock Talk, where we walked down the paddock for on the Saturday and ended up in the pit lane for the Sunday. Yeah, it's a brilliant name. So yeah, Craig, that was British GT was brilliant, and hopefully we'll be up at Oldham Park for the next round as well. But there's one more round. There's the Dutch Grand Prix, then that's the same weekend as the Italian Grand Prix. So we'll have to see what sort of content we can put out for both of them races. It's going to be quite interesting.
It'll be a busy weekend, but then that is exactly what we want.
Exactly. So yeah, I do this every single podcast. You're listening on whatever. You'll find us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and all usual podcasting platforms. Just like every other episode we've done, and every future episode as well. We have got a few interesting plans coming up for future content, future of this podcast as well. So keep your eyes out across social media for that. Of course, all of Craig's links will be in the description below. Your photos, there's a brilliant gallery up from Goodwood and the last British GT round, so make sure you go and check them out. So yeah, Craig, once again, thank you for joining me for this one, and to everyone listening, well thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for the Dutch Grand Prix, which will hopefully be longer than 3 minutes. Goodbye.